Amara has always been passionate about basketball. But when her school coach dismisses her talent, she realizes it's not just about skill. It's about who gets noticed and who gets left out. Determined not to be defined by others' expectations, Amara forms her own team of overlooked players. But as they rise through the ranks, she must face her toughest opponent yet. The team that rejected her and the coach who still sees her as invisible. Will they be able to defy the odds and claim victory? Or will the system that shut them out win again? Before we get started, don't forget to like, subscribe, and let us know where you're watching from. Let's dive in. Amara stood on the edge of the basketball court, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. She wiped her palms on her shorts, hoping to calm the nerves. This was it. The day she had been waiting for. Tryouts for the high school basketball team were finally here, and she had been preparing for this moment for months. Her skills were sharp, her shooting accurate, and her defense strong. All she needed was to show the coach what she could do. But as the gym filled with other hopefuls, Amara couldn't help but feel an unsettling sense of doubt creeping in. She looked around and saw the familiar faces, tall boys and girls who had been the coach's favorites for years. Most of them had the right connections or came from families that were well known in the school. Amara, on the other hand, was an outsider. She wasn't from a family that could afford private basketball coaches or fancy sports gear. All she had was her talent, her determination, and the hours she had put in practicing at the local park, playing with whoever was willing to let her join their pickup games. As the tryouts began, Amara gave it everything she had. She sprinted across the court, passed with precision, and sank shot after shot from various distances. Her footwork was quick, her defense solid, and her energy unwavering. She felt alive on the court, as if every dribble of the ball matched the beat of her heart. But as time went on, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The coach, a tall man with a gruff voice and a clipboard always in hand, barely seemed to notice her. His eyes were on the taller players, the ones he already knew, the ones who fit his mold of what a successful basketball player should look like. "Good hustle, Mike," the coach called out to a boy who had just made a sloppy pass. Mike had fumbled the ball earlier, but the coach didn't seem to care. He grinned at the encouragement, and Amara's chest tightened. She pushed harder, determined to catch the coach's attention. During the drill, she dribbled past two defenders and made a clean layup, a move that had taken her weeks to perfect. She glanced at the coach, hoping to see some sign of approval, but he was already looking the other way, talking to another player. As the tryouts wore on, the sinking feeling in Amara's stomach deepened. It was as if she didn't exist. She was running, shooting, defending, but none of it seemed to matter. The coach's attention was elsewhere, always elsewhere. By the end of the tryout, Amara felt drained, not just physically, but emotionally. She sat on the bench, watching the other students laugh and congratulate each other. They were excited, buzzing with the possibility of making the team, while she sat there, invisible. When the coach finally blew the whistle to end the session, Amara stood up, clutching her water bottle, and made her way toward him. Her heart was pounding, but she knew she had to speak up. If she didn't, she'd never forgive herself. "Coach," she called out, her voice steady despite the knot in her throat. He looked up briefly from his clipboard. "Yeah? I was just wondering if you had any feedback for me?" she asked, trying to keep her voice calm. "I really want to be a part of the team. I've been working hard and—" "Listen," the coach interrupted, not unkindly but dismissively. "You've got some skills, but I've already got my eye on a few key players. Maybe next year." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. "Next year?" He nodded, already glancing down at his clipboard again. "Yeah, next year. Keep working at it." Amara stood there for a moment, the rejection sinking in. She had done everything she could, but it wasn't enough. Or maybe she realized, it wasn't about what she could do at all. It was about who she wasn't. The right height, the right look, from the right background. And that wasn't something she could change. Feeling defeated, Amara gathered her things and left the gym. As she walked home, the sting of rejection clung to her. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the streets, but she barely noticed. Her mind was racing, replaying the tryouts over and over, wondering what she could have done differently. but deep down, she knew there was nothing more she could have done. It wasn't her performance that had let her down, it was the system. The coach had made up his mind long before she ever stepped onto the court. When she arrived home, her mom was in the kitchen, the smell of spices and simmering vegetables filling the air. Normally, the comforting smell of her mother's cooking would lift her spirits, but today, nothing seemed to ease the heavy feeling in her chest. "How'd it go?" her mom asked, turning to look at her with a hopeful smile. Amara forced a smile, but her heart wasn't in it. "It was okay," she said quietly, dropping her bag on the floor and sinking into a chair at the kitchen table. Her mom's smile faltered as she wiped her hands on a towel and sat down across from her. "What happened?" Amara sighed, rubbing her eyes with the heels of her hands. "The coach said I wasn't good enough. He didn't even give me a chance. I worked so hard, Mom, but it's like he didn't even see me." Her mom reached across the table, placing a hand on Amara's. "Oh, sweetheart, I know how hard you worked, but sometimes people don't see what's right in front of them." Amara looked up, tears stinging the corners of her eyes. "It's not fair. I know I'm good enough. I know it." Her mom squeezed her hand gently. "You are good enough, Amara. Don't ever doubt that. But maybe it's time to think about what you can do outside of their expectations. Maybe you don't need that team to prove yourself." Amara frowned, unsure what her mom meant. "What do you mean?" Her mom smiled softly, her eyes filled with understanding. "Sometimes when doors don't open, it's because you're meant to build your own." The word stuck with Amara as she lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling. Build her own door? Start her own path? Could she really do that? She didn't know the answer yet, but one thing was certain. She wasn't going to give up. Not on basketball, and not on herself. If the coach couldn't see her potential, maybe it was time to show it to the world in her own way. The days following the tryouts were long and heavy for Amara. It wasn't just the rejection that weighed on her, it was the feeling of being unseen, of knowing deep down that she was more than capable, but still overlooked. The halls of her high school seemed to taunt her with posters promoting the basketball season, reminders that she wasn't part of the team. Everywhere she turned, there were whispers of excitement about the upcoming games, practice schedules, and team strategies, but none of it involved her. Jade, Amara's best friend, was the one person who truly understood the weight of it all. They had grown up together, practically inseparable since elementary school. Jade wasn't much into sports, but she was always there to support Amara's passion for basketball. "It's not fair," Jade said one afternoon as they sat together during lunch. "You're just as good as any of those other players. I don't get why the coach couldn't see that." Amara sighed, pushing her food around her tray with a fork. "I don't know, Jade. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm not what they're looking for." Jade narrowed her eyes. "Or maybe it's the coach. He's stuck in his ways, only seeing what he wants to see. You don't fit into his little box, so he doesn't think you're good enough, but that's on him, not you." Amara looked up at her friend, her lips curling into a small smile. Jade always knew how to make her feel a little better. But even with her friend's reassurance, the sting of rejection still clung to her. That evening, after school, Amara went to the local park. It was where she felt most at home, a place where she could forget about everything else and just focus on the game. The court was cracked in some places, the paint faded from years of use, but to Amara, it was perfect. It had been her training ground for as long as she could remember, and today, it was exactly where she needed to be. She dribbled the ball, the familiar sound of rubber bouncing against concrete soothing her as she moved across the court. She practiced her shots, focusing on the rhythm of her movements, trying to shake off the frustration that had been building inside her since the tryouts. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the court, Amara lost herself in the game. After a while, she noticed an older man sitting on a bench near the edge of the park, watching her. She recognized him, Mr. Davis, one of the neighborhood regulars who often came to the park in the evenings. He had been a semi-professional basketball player back in the day, before an injury ended his career. He was known around the neighborhood for giving advice to kids who played at the park, though Amara had never spoken to him much beyond a polite greeting. Tonight, however, Mr. Davis seemed more interested in her than usual. When she finished her practice and sat down on the sidelines to catch her breath, he approached her, his cane tapping lightly against the pavement as he walked. "You've got a good shot," he said, his voice deep and gravelly, worn with age but still strong. "I've been watching you for a while now." Amara glanced up, surprised. "Thanks," she replied, a little unsure of where the conversation was going. "You play with a lot of heart. I can see that," he continued, leaning on his cane as he looked out at the court. "But I also see that you've got something weighing on you." Amara hesitated, not wanting to unload her frustrations on someone she barely knew. But there was something about Mr. Davis's presence that felt reassuring, like he understood things that most people didn't. "I didn't make the school team," she said finally, her voice quiet. "I tried my best, but the coach didn't even notice me." Mr. Davis nodded slowly, his eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "That's a tough break. But let me ask you this. Are you going to let one coach's opinion define what you can do?" Amara blinked, caught off guard by the question. "I don't know. It just feels like if I can't make the school team, maybe I'm not as good as I thought." Mr. Davis shook his head. "Nah, don't think like that. Basketball isn't just about being on some school team. It's about what you bring to the court, how you play the game, and how you push yourself when nobody's watching. That coach might not have seen your potential, but that doesn't mean it's not there." Amara felt a flicker of hope stir inside her, but doubt quickly followed. "So what do I do now? I still want to play. I love the game too much to just give up, but I don't know where to go from here." Mr. Davis was quiet for a moment, studying her. Then a small smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. "You ever think about starting your own team?" Amara frowned, surprised by the suggestion. "Start my own team? How would I even do that?" "You're not the only one around here with talent, you know," Mr. Davis said, gesturing toward the park. "There are plenty of kids out there who've been overlooked, just like you. All it takes is a little leadership, some hard work, and a lot of heart. You can bring people together, build something real. A team that plays for the love of the game, not just for some school title." The idea was wild, almost impossible, Amara thought. But as Mr. Davis spoke, she felt something inside her shift. She had spent so much time trying to fit into the system that had rejected her. But what if she didn't need that system at all? What if she could carve out her own path on her own terms? "I don't know if I could do that," she admitted, though her mind was already racing with possibilities. Mr. Davis smiled, a knowing look in his eyes. "You'll never know until you try. And trust me, kid, you've got what it takes. I've seen it." Amara sat there for a long time after Mr. Davis left, thinking about his words. Could she really do it? Could she start her own team, bring together a group of players who had been overlooked like her? It seemed daunting, but the more she thought about it, the more the idea began to take root. The next day at school, Amara's mind was still buzzing with the possibility. During lunch, she sat with Jade, who was scrolling through her phone while absent-mindedly munching on a sandwich. "Hey, Jade," Amara said suddenly, leaning across the table. "What would you think if I started my own basketball team?" Jade's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Your own team? Like a whole new team?" "Yeah," Amara said, her excitement growing as she spoke. "There are a lot of people at school who didn't make the team. What if I brought them together? We could practice on our own, play games, maybe even compete in local tournaments." Jade stared at her for a moment, then broke into a grin. "Amara, that's genius. You'd be the team captain, right?" Amara smiled, feeling the first real spark of excitement she'd had in days. "I guess I would be. And I'd need help finding players, organizing practices. I'd need all the support I can get." Jade leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with enthusiasm. "Count me in. I'm not much of a player, but I can help with logistics, setting up practices, and finding people who might want to join." Amara couldn't believe how quickly the idea was coming together. What had started as a passing suggestion from Mr. Davis was now turning into something real, something tangible. And for the first time in a long time, Amara felt a surge of hope. Maybe she didn't need the school team after all. Maybe, just maybe, she could build something even better. As the days passed, Amara began reaching out to people she knew, classmates who hadn't made the school team, kids from the neighborhood, anyone who loved basketball but hadn't been given a chance to shine. Slowly but surely, her dream of building her own team was becoming a reality. It wasn't going to be easy. There were challenges ahead, finding a place to practice, getting enough players, and learning to work together. But Amara was ready for it. She had faced rejection and disappointment, but now she was ready to take control of her own destiny. And this time, she wasn't going to be overlooked. The spark had been lit, but now came the hard part, turning that flicker of inspiration into something real. As the days passed, Amara threw herself into the task of building her own basketball team. The idea had filled her with hope, but it was also daunting. She had no experience leading a team, no access to fancy facilities or equipment, and no guarantee that people would even want to join her. But one thing was clear: she wasn't going to let that stop her. The first step was finding players. Amara spent her lunch breaks and after-school hours talking to anyone who might have the slightest interest in basketball. She reached out to kids who hadn't made the school team, as well as some neighborhood friends she had played with in the past. She put up homemade flyers at school, hoping to attract more interest, and even spread the word at the local park where she practiced. At first, it felt like no one was paying attention. Some kids were hesitant, unsure about joining a team that wasn't officially sanctioned by the school. Others were discouraged, having faced their own rejections and believing that if they weren't good enough for the school team, they weren't good enough for any team. But Amara was persistent. She knew that there were others out there, like her, who were passionate about basketball but had been overlooked. She just had to find them. It started with a trickle. A girl named Yara, a quiet sophomore who had tried out for the school team but had been cut, showed up at one of Amara's informal practices at the park. Yara was tall, with a quick, graceful stride and a killer jump shot, but she had been passed over for being too shy and not assertive enough, as the school coach had said. "I just want to play," Yara admitted after their first practice together. "I don't care about being on the school team anymore. I just miss the game." Amara smiled, nodding in understanding. "That's exactly why I'm doing this. We're going to play because we love the game, not because someone tells us we're good enough." As the word spread, more players trickled in. Next was a guy named Deshaun, who had always been passionate about basketball, but had given up after the school coach told him he was too small to play at a competitive level. Deshaun wasn't the tallest player, but he had speed, precision, and an uncanny ability to read the court, finding opportunities where others didn't. "People underestimate me all the time," Deshaun said one evening after practice. "But when they see me on the court, they change their minds pretty quick." With each new addition, Amara's team began to take shape. They didn't have uniforms or fancy equipment, but they had heart. Every evening, they met at the park, practicing their drills, running plays, and building trust with each other. Amara had never led a team before, but she quickly found herself stepping into the role of captain, organizing practice sessions, giving pep talks, and pushing her teammates to improve. Jade, true to her word, took on the role of team manager. She wasn't a basketball player, but she had a natural talent for organization and logistics. Jade handled the behind-the-scenes work, from scheduling practices to spreading the word about the team's progress. She even reached out to local businesses to see if they could sponsor the team, hoping to scrape together enough money for jerseys and better equipment. At first, things were rough. Without access to a gym, the team had to practice in the park, often dodging kids on bikes, joggers, and even the occasional stray dog. The makeshift conditions made it hard to focus, but Amara refused to let the obstacles get in the way. "We're going to make this work," she told her teammates one evening after a particularly chaotic practice. "I know it's not perfect, but if we keep pushing ourselves, we're going to get better. And one day, we'll prove to everyone who doubted us that we belong here." Despite the challenges, Amara's team began to bond. There was Zeke, a tall, lanky boy who had been cut from the school team for being too uncoordinated. He wasn't the most graceful player, but he had a powerful shot and a knack for blocking opponents with his long arms. Then there was Maya, a girl with fierce determination and quick reflexes, who had been overlooked because she wasn't as experienced as some of the other players. Amara saw potential in her and worked closely with her, helping her improve her skills. As they practiced together, the team members began to open up about their own experiences with rejection and prejudice. They weren't just a group of random players anymore. They were becoming a family, bound by their shared struggles and their love for the game. One night, after a grueling practice session, they sat in a circle on the court, cooling off and talking about their lives. It was Yara who first broke the silence. "You know, I used to think that if I wasn't on the school team, I wasn't worth anything," Yara said, wiping sweat from her brow. "But now, being part of this, I feel like I finally belong somewhere." Deshaun nodded in agreement. "Yeah, same here. I've always felt like I was too small, like I didn't fit into the coach's idea of what a player should be. But this team is different. We're all different, and that's what makes us strong." Amara smiled as she listened to her teammates talk. They had come from different backgrounds, faced different challenges, but they had found each other. And together, they were building something that mattered. But as the weeks passed, Amara knew that practicing in the park wasn't enough. They needed to prove themselves in real competition, to show the world that they were more than just a group of misfits. The local amateur basketball league, which hosted tournaments throughout the year, was their best chance to make a name for themselves. The only problem? They didn't have the funds to enter. Jade, ever resourceful, came up with a plan. She organized a fundraiser, rallying support from the local community. They sold homemade snacks, held car washes, and even performed basketball trick shots in the park to raise money. Slowly but surely, the funds started to come in. Local businesses chipped in, offering small donations, and a few community leaders even took notice, impressed by Amara's determination and leadership. By the end of the month, they had raised enough money to enter the tournament. The day of their first game arrived, and Amara's team was buzzing with a mixture of excitement and nerves. They had come a long way from those early, chaotic practices in the park, but now they were about to face their first real test. Their opponents were a well-established team with sleek uniforms, polished skills, and plenty of experience. As they walked onto the court, Amara could feel the eyes of the other team sizing them up, and it wasn't hard to guess what they were thinking. They saw Amara's team as a ragtag group of outsiders, a team that didn't belong. But Amara wasn't intimidated. She looked at her teammates, each one of them standing tall despite the odds stacked against them, and she knew that they were ready. The game was intense from the start. Their opponents were fast and skilled, but Amara's team fought back with everything they had. Deshaun's speed and agility helped them stay in the game, while Zeke's powerful blocks kept their opponents from scoring easily. Yara's jump shot was flawless, and Maya's defense was relentless. Amara felt the pressure mounting as the game wore on. Every point was hard-earned, and every mistake could cost them the win. But as the minutes ticked by, something remarkable happened. The team stopped worrying about proving themselves to others. Instead, they focused on playing for each other, on trusting in their own abilities and the bond they had built. And it worked. In the final minutes of the game, with the score tied, Amara took the ball. Her heart was pounding, but she had never felt more focused. She dribbled past two defenders, faked a pass, and then made a clean, perfect shot from the three-point line. The ball sailed through the air, and for a moment everything seemed to slow down. Then, with a soft swish, it passed through the net. The crowd erupted into cheers as the final buzzer sounded. Amara's team had won. They had done it. They had proven that they belonged. As Amara stood on the court, her teammates surrounding her in celebration, she felt a surge of pride and gratitude. They had built this team from the ground up, defied expectations, and overcome every obstacle in their way. And now, they were stronger than ever. It was just the beginning, but Amara knew one thing for sure. They were ready for whatever came next. The victory in their first tournament game was sweet, but it was only the beginning. Amara and her team were on cloud nine, but they quickly realized that their win had also drawn attention from the local basketball scene. Their next few games would be tougher, and the spotlight on them was growing brighter, bringing with it both opportunities and challenges they hadn't anticipated. After the celebration from their first win died down, reality set in. They had proven themselves, but now they had to maintain that momentum. The tournament was far from over, and their next opponents were well-established teams with seasoned players and coaches who had been in the game for years. Amara's team had heart, but heart alone wasn't going to carry them through every game. One afternoon, as they gathered for practice, Amara could sense the shift in the team's energy. The high from their first victory was still there, but so was the weight of expectation. They had tasted success, but now they had to prove it wasn't a fluke. The pressure was mounting. "We did great last time," Amara said, trying to rally her teammates during their warm-up. "But we can't get too comfortable. These next games are going to be tough, and we need to be even better than we were before." Zeke, who had been one of their key players in the last game, nodded but looked worried. "I don't know, Amara. That last team underestimated us, but word's getting around now. People know we're serious competition, and they're going to be ready for us." Amara knew he was right. They had taken their first opponents by surprise, but that advantage was gone now. Other teams were watching them, studying their plays, and preparing to counter their strengths. But they couldn't let that intimidate them. "Let them be ready," Amara said firmly. "We're not just here to prove a point. We're here because we deserve to be. We've got the talent and the drive, and we've worked just as hard as any of these other teams. If they want to bring their best, then we'll bring ours too." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment, she could see the tension in her teammates' faces ease slightly. They trusted her, and she trusted them. They had come this far together, and they weren't about to back down now. As the tournament progressed, the games became more intense. Their next match was against a team that had been dominating the local league for years, a team coached by a man who had a reputation for winning at all costs. The opposing players were skilled, aggressive, and physically imposing. When Amara's team stepped onto the court, it was clear that their opponents weren't going to take them lightly. From the opening whistle, it was a battle. The other team played hard, pushing Amara's group to the limit. Every pass, every shot, every defensive move was contested fiercely. Amara felt the pressure bearing down on her as she dribbled the ball up the court, her mind racing with the need to make the right play at every moment. The referees, too, seemed to be more critical in this game. Every minor infraction from Amara's team was called out, while some questionable moves by their opponents went unnoticed. It wasn't fair, and Amara could feel the frustration building among her teammates. Maya, usually calm under pressure, had already received a technical foul for arguing a call that should have gone their way. By halftime, they were down by 10 points. The locker room was tense, the atmosphere thick with frustration. Yara was sitting with her head in her hands, Deshaun was pacing back and forth, and Zeke was staring at the floor, his confidence visibly shaken. Amara sat down, taking a deep breath before speaking. "I know it feels like everything's against us right now," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos swirling inside her. "But we've been here before. We've faced challenges, and we've always found a way to rise above them." Deshaun stopped pacing and looked at her. His brow furrowed. "Yeah, but this time it feels different. These guys are on a whole other level, and the refs, they're not exactly on our side." "I know," Amara admitted, "but we can't control the refs or what the other team does. All we can control is how we play. And we didn't come this far to give up now." Yara lifted her head, her eyes meeting Amara's. "But what if it's not enough?" "It will be," Amara said, her voice firm. "We're going to go back out there and play our game, focus on our strengths. We faced teams that were bigger, faster, and more experienced, and we've beaten them because we played as a team. We can do this." The second half of the game was even more brutal than the first. Their opponents played with relentless aggression, but Amara's team fought back with heart and precision. Every basket felt like a small victory, every defensive stop a reminder that they belonged on that court. With just a few minutes left in the game, they had closed the gap to 2 points. The crowd was on the edge of their seats, the tension in the gym palpable. Amara's heart raced as she dribbled the ball down the court, scanning for an opening. The defense was tight, but she saw a small window of opportunity. She passed the ball to Yara, who caught it just outside the 3-point line. Yara hesitated for a fraction of a second, and in that moment, One of the opposing players lunged toward her, trying to block the shot. But Yara stayed calm, her focus unwavering. With perfect form, she released the ball. Time seemed to slow as the ball sailed through the air. The gym went silent, everyone holding their breath as they watched its trajectory. Swish. The ball passed through the net cleanly, and the crowd erupted in cheers. Yara's three-pointer had put them ahead by 1 point with less than 30 seconds on the clock. But the game wasn't over yet. Their opponents called a timeout, regrouping for one final push. Amara gathered her team together, her heart pounding in her chest. They were so close, but they couldn't afford to lose focus now. "We've got this," she told them, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "We just need one more stop. Let's finish this." The final possession was a blur of motion and tension. The opposing team tried to drive to the basket, but Zeke blocked the shot, sending the ball flying out of bounds. With only a few seconds left, their opponents inbounded the ball, desperate for a last-second miracle. But Amara anticipated the pass, intercepting it and securing the win as the final buzzer sounded. They had done it. They had won against one of the toughest teams in the tournament. As Amara's teammates rushed onto the court, celebrating their hard-fought victory, she felt a swell of pride in her chest. They had faced adversity, pushed through doubt, and come out on top. It wasn't just about basketball anymore. It was about proving to themselves and to everyone else that they were more than capable, that they were a force to be reckoned with. But the victory wasn't without its cost. The intensity of the game had taken a toll on her team. Yara's ankle was sore from a hard fall. Deshawn had bruises from being knocked around in the paint, and Maya's confidence had been shaken by the foul calls. Amara herself felt the strain in her legs, her muscles aching from the relentless pace of the game. They were exhausted, both physically and emotionally, but they had won. And in that moment, nothing else mattered. As the team huddled together, catching their breath and celebrating, Amara noticed the coach of the opposing team watching them from across the court. His expression was unreadable, but there was a hint of something in his eyes. Respect, perhaps, or maybe recognition. He had underestimated them, just like so many others had. But now, there was no denying what they had accomplished. The next few games would be even tougher. Amara knew that. The deeper they went into the tournament, the stronger the competition would become. But they were ready. They had faced the best and come out victorious. They had risen above every challenge thrown their way, and they weren't about to stop now. As they left the gym that night, tired but triumphant, Amara couldn't help but think about how far they had come. They had started as a group of misfits, overlooked and underestimated, but now they were a team, a real team. And together, there was nothing they couldn't achieve. The road ahead was still long, but Amara was more determined than ever. They were rising above everything that had once held them back. And with each game, each victory, they were proving to the world and to themselves that they belonged. The tournament was nearing its climax, and the air buzzed with anticipation. Amara's team had made it further than anyone had expected. Each victory felt like a step toward redemption, not just for her, but for every player who had been overlooked, underestimated, or told they didn't belong. The community had started to take notice of them. Local kids showed up to their games, parents cheered them on, and even people who had initially doubted them started to acknowledge their talent and determination. But now, as they prepared for the championship game, there was one final hurdle. Their opponents. The school team coached by the very man who had dismissed Amara at tryouts. When Amara saw the tournament bracket and realized who they were facing, her stomach churned. The irony wasn't lost on her. The same coach who had failed to see her potential was now standing in her path to victory. It was poetic, almost karmic. She had dreamed of this moment, the chance to prove to him and to herself that she was more than what he had assumed. But now that the moment had arrived, the weight of it felt heavy on her shoulders. The school team was skilled, no doubt. They had a history of dominating the local scene, with players who were considered the best in the area. The coach had handpicked them, molding them into a well-oiled machine that played with precision and confidence. And Amara knew many of these players. They were the same ones who had walked the school hallways with a sense of entitlement, knowing they were part of the elite. As the day of the championship game approached, Amara's team trained harder than ever before. Practices were intense, pushing their limits physically and mentally. Every player was feeling the pressure, but none more so than Amara. Jade noticed it one afternoon when they were sitting in the park after practice, the fading sunlight casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. "You've been quiet lately," Jade said, leaning against the back of the park bench. "More than usual, I mean." Amara shrugged, her gaze fixed on the distant horizon. "I guess I've just been thinking a lot." "About the game? About everything?" "It's a lot," Amara admitted, rubbing her hands together. "This game is more than just a championship for me. It's like I've been building up to this moment for months, and now that it's here, I don't want to mess it up." Jade frowned. "You're not going to mess it up, Amara. Look at how far you've come. How far all of you have come. No one expected you to make it to the finals, and now you're one game away from winning the whole thing. That's huge." "I know, but—" Amara hesitated, the words catching in her throat. "It's not just about winning. It's about facing that coach, the one who didn't even give me a chance. I want to show him that he was wrong, that I'm more than what he thought I was. But part of me is scared. What if we lose? What if I don't prove anything at all?" Jade turned to face her fully, her expression serious. "You've already proven more than enough, Amara. Win or lose, you've shown everyone, and yourself, that you're a leader, that you're talented, and that you're capable of creating something amazing from nothing. This team wouldn't exist without you. The players wouldn't have come together without your vision. That's a win, no matter what happens in the game." Amara smiled faintly, grateful for Jade's unwavering support. "Thanks, Jade. I guess I just needed to hear that." "Anytime," Jade said, giving her a light nudge. "Now go out there and remind that coach why he should have picked you in the first place." The day of the championship game arrived, and the tension was palpable. The gym was packed with spectators, from students to families and community members, all eager to see who would come out on top. Amara's team huddled together in the locker room, the usual pre-game jitters amplified by the importance of the moment. "This is it," Amara said, looking around at her teammates. "We've worked so hard to get here. I know we're all nervous, but remember why we're doing this. We're not just playing to win a trophy. We're playing because we love the game, because we've been overlooked, and because we know we deserve to be here." Yara, standing beside her with her ankle still bandaged from the last game, nodded resolutely. "Let's show them who we are." Maya, her eyes gleaming with determination, added, "We've faced tougher teams before. This isn't any different. Let's play our game." The team nodded in agreement, their confidence bolstered by each other's resolve. As they walked out onto the court, Amara could feel the adrenaline coursing through her veins. The school team, with their polished uniforms and confident smiles, was already warming up. That coach, stood on the sidelines, clipboard in hand, looking as calm and collected as ever. When their eyes met across the court, Amara felt a wave of emotion. There was no animosity, no anger, just a deep sense of purpose. This wasn't about proving herself to him anymore. It was about proving something to herself, that she could rise above everything and be her own champion. The whistle blew, and the game began. From the start, it was clear that the school team wasn't going to make it easy. They played with precision, executing their plays with speed and accuracy. But Amara's team had something the other team didn't: heart. Every player on her team had something to prove, not to anyone else, but to themselves. They played with a passion that couldn't be matched, diving for loose balls, blocking shots, and fighting for every point. Amara controlled the pace, weaving through defenders, setting up plays, and sinking shots with a confidence that had been built over months of hard work. Deshaun's speed was unmatched, and he darted around the court, making steals and fast breaks that left the school team scrambling to keep up. Zeke, despite his earlier self-doubt, had become a defensive powerhouse, blocking shots and intimidating opponents with his height and reach. But the game was close. Too close. The school team had experience and discipline on their side, and every time Amara's team pulled ahead, the school team would close the gap. The score stayed neck and neck throughout the game, with neither team able to maintain a significant lead. As the clock wound down to the final minute, the score was tied. Amara's heart raced as she dribbled the ball up the court, her eyes scanning for an opening. The crowd was on their feet, the noise in the gym a deafening roar of cheers and anticipation. She passed the ball to Yara, who was immediately double-teamed by two defenders. Yara looked trapped, but she faked a shot, drawing the defenders closer, then passed the ball back to Amara just as the clock hit 20 seconds. Amara had an opening, but it wasn't perfect. One of the school team's best defenders was closing in on her fast. She could hear the pounding of feet, feel the pressure mounting as the seconds ticked away. But then, something clicked. The hours of practice, the countless moments of doubt, the hard-fought victories, it all came rushing back to her. She had been in this position before, playing on courts without the bright lights, without the crowd. And in those moments, when no one was watching, she had always found a way. With a deep breath, Amara squared up and took the shot. The ball arched high into the air, spinning in slow motion as it headed toward the hoop. The entire gym seemed to hold its breath, every eye following the ball's trajectory. Amara's heart pounded in her chest as she watched, her pulse in sync with the ball's movement. Swish. The ball sailed through the hoop with a clean, satisfying sound, and the gym erupted into cheers. The school team had one final chance, but their desperation shot missed, and the final buzzer blared through the gym. Amara's team had won. They were the champions. Her teammates rushed onto the court, shouting and hugging each other, their joy overflowing. Amara stood in the center of it all, her chest heaving, her heart soaring. They had done it. Against all odds, they had risen to the top. As the celebration continued, Amara glanced across the court and saw the coach. He was standing silently, his arms folded, watching the scene unfold. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and in that moment, Amara saw something she hadn't expected: respect. The coach gave her a small nod, and Amara nodded back, a quiet acknowledgement passing between them. She didn't need his validation anymore, but it still felt good to know that he recognized what she had accomplished. She had proven herself, not just to him, but to everyone, and most importantly, to herself. Later that night, as the gym emptied and the excitement faded, Amara sat with her team, the championship trophy between them. They were tired, sweaty, and emotionally drained, but there was a sense of contentment that filled the air. "We did it," Yara said quietly, her voice full of awe. Amara smiled, looking around at her teammates. "Yeah, we did." The journey had been long and hard, filled with obstacles and moments of doubt, but they had come out stronger on the other side. And in the end, it wasn't just about the championship. It was about the bonds they had formed, the lessons they had learned, and the belief they had found in themselves. As they sat there, basking in the quiet aftermath of their victory, Amara knew that this was only the beginning. They had faced prejudice, rejection, and doubt, but they had risen above it all. And now, with their newfound confidence, there was no limit to what they could achieve. Karma had come full circle, but Amara didn't need revenge to feel whole. She had built something greater than any individual validation. She had built a family, a team that would always have her back, no matter what. And that, more than any trophy, was the greatest victory of all. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Click on the video now to watch. We appreciate your support, and we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments.